Welcome back to the channel, everyone. Today is a beautifully dramatic Tuesday, and I am absolutely buzzing with adrenaline after watching the latest episode. Grab your coffee, take a deep breath, and let's dive straight into the absolute masterpiece of television we were just gifted. My mind is completely blown by what just happened on Spoon Island, and we need to break down every single agonizing, brilliant second of it. I am still shaking from the sheer cinematic terror of this episode. I genuinely think we are missing the point if we don't immediately stand up and applaud the writing and directing teams for the terrifying brilliance of the Wyndemere fire. When the episode ended, I was left staring at my screen, completely breathless, my heart hammering in my chest. I feel so incredibly validated by that opening sequence, where the night sky over Spoon Island turned a violent, bruised orange. The way I see it, the show has been building this suffocating tension for months with the WSB storyline, and seeing it literally combust into a raging inferno was the most satisfying, albeit horrifying, visual payoff. I love the way the lighting changed when the first massive explosion ripped through Ross Cullum's laboratory, casting these jagged, demonic shadows across the castle walls. It wasn't just a fire, it was the physical manifestation of all the lies, the corruption, and the sheer danger that has been suffocating our beloved characters. Let's talk about Carly Spencer, because I feel like this is the best they've written her in years. I know a lot of people are saying this storyline is dragging, or complaining that Carly shouldn't be playing action hero by breaking into a fortress, but I actually think this slow burn is exactly what's needed, because I feel like it strips her down to her absolute core, a mother defending her cub. When Carly and Lucas Jones first breached the perimeter of Wyndemere under the cover of darkness, the tension was palpable. But the moment that fire broke out, the shift in Carly's eyes was a masterclass in acting from Laura Wright. I think the director's choice to focus the camera tightly on Carly's face as she first smelled the acrid smoke was brilliant because it made me feel the exact second her adrenaline hijacked her rational brain. You could see the realization wash over her that this was no longer a stealth mission. It was a race against a ticking, burning clock. I am completely obsessed with the physical choices made in the scene where Carly tries to charge into the inferno. Every time I share a thought about Carly's impulsiveness, I always go back to her fierce, almost feral maternal instinct. And this episode anchored that perfectly. The way she violently clawed at the first responder's heavy turnout coat, her voice cracking and tearing as she screamed Jocelyn's name into the roaring flames, it gave me full-body chills. I believe this is why Carly is the beating heart of General Hospital. She isn't a trained WSB tactical agent. She doesn't have fireproof gear. She just has this raw, unyielding love for her daughter. I feel so deeply connected to her pain here, because the script didn't give her a magical superhero moment where she easily kicked down a door. It gave her a brutal, realistic, impenetrable wall of fire that she couldn't punch her way through, leaving her utterly powerless. And we absolutely cannot ignore Lucas Jones in this devastating scenario. The way I interpret it, bringing Lucas along for this rescue mission was the smartest narrative decision the writers have made all year. Lucas has been stepping into this action hero era, taking risks and showing his bravery, but seeing him forced to physically hold his sister back from a burning castle? Heartbreaking. I love the specific moment when Lucas wrapped his arms tightly around Carly's waist, dragging her backward as the burning front portico of Wyndemere suddenly collapsed in a shower of sparks. You could see the sheer agony on Ryan Carnes' face. He wanted to save his niece just as badly, but he couldn't let his sister die a senseless death in the process. I think this dynamic highlights the deep, often underappreciated bond between the Spencer siblings, grounding the high-octane action in profound family tragedy. Now, we have to talk about the dungeon, because the contrast between the outside and the inside was staggering. I genuinely think the claustrophobic direction of the scenes with Jocelyn Jacks and Liesl Obrecht was some of the best psychological horror-adjacent television daytime has ever produced. I feel so incredibly anxious, just thinking about the way the thick, toxic black smoke began curling silently under the heavy, iron-reinforced wooden door of their cell. The contrast between the loud, raging inferno upstairs and the dark, suffocating trap downstairs was visually stunning. I believe Eden McCoy is delivering the performance of her career right now, balancing Jocelyn's inherent bravery with the very real, human terror of being buried alive in a burning stone tomb. In my opinion, the way Jocelyn reacted to the encroaching smoke is exactly what makes her such a compelling dynamic character. She didn't just collapse and weep, she got angry. I love the way she grabbed the rusted iron bars of the cell, coughing violently as the oxygen thinned, yet still trying to pry the metal loose with her bare, soot-stained hands. It showed that she is Carly's daughter through and through, refusing to go down without a fight. I feel like the writers are using this horrific fire to forge Jocelyn into an even stronger WSB agent. She is facing her own mortality, trapped in the dark, and the psychological weight of that scene, the realization that her training might not be enough to save her from a structural fire, was phenomenally executed. And then there is Liesl Obrecht. I think Kathleen Gotti brings such a unique, powerful gravity to every single scene she is in. The way I see it, having Liesl trapped down there with Jocelyn creates this beautiful generational and ideological contrast. Liesl has survived so much in her life. She survived Cesar Faison, she survived kidnappings, she survived WSB prisons and heartbreak, but in this moment, the fire acts as the ultimate, unforgiving equalizer. I loved the quiet, devastating moment when Liesl slumped heavily against the damp stone wall, her breathing visibly shallow, and simply looked at Jocelyn with a silent, heavy acknowledgement of their shared doom. It made me feel a profound sense of grief, because, for the first time in recent memory, the indomitable, fiercely resourceful doctor, Obrecht looked truly helpless against the elements. I know the fandom is currently up in arms about the fact that the rescue mission ultimately failed. My timeline is flooded with people complaining that this episode was too depressing, that Carly should have found a secret passage to break through, or that Jocelyn and Liesl should have been pulled from the rubble at the last heroic second. But I am here to fiercely defend this writing choice. I actually think the failure of the rescue mission is exactly what makes this storyline a masterpiece of modern soap opera angst. If Carly had just swooped in and saved the day, it would have entirely cheapened the threat of Ross Cullum and the WSB. I feel like we as an audience need to sit in this uncomfortable, agonizing despair to truly appreciate the life or death stakes of this cold fusion plot. The failure makes the danger real. The destruction of Ross Cullum's laboratory is another plot point I am absolutely in love with right now. The irony of the situation is just delicious and brilliantly layered. Cullum has been using Wyndemere as his personal, untouchable fortress, conducting these highly dangerous experiments and holding people hostage with absolute impunity. I believe the fire starting in his lab is perfect poetic justice, but it also creates a massive narrative complication that I'm entirely here for. The specific shot of the cold fusion prototypes melting into glowing slag, the crucial evidence vials shattering into a million pieces in the extreme heat, it was visually spectacular. I think the writers are brilliant for destroying the evidence, because now, even if Jocelyn and Liesl somehow survive, how do they legally prove what Cullum was doing? It forces all of our characters to rely on their wits and alliances, rather than just handing a neat, tidy folder of evidence over to the authorities. Let's dive deeper into Carly's psychological state outside the burning castle, because Laura Wright deserves all the Emmys for those final, gut-wrenching minutes of the episode. The way I interpret her performance, Carly wasn't just crying over a failed plan. Her entire soul was breaking in real time. I feel so completely gutted by the specific physical choice she made to drop heavily to her knees in the soot-covered grass, her hands clutching her own hair as she stared blankly at the roaring inferno. It wasn't a pretty, manicured Hollywood cry. It was a guttural, soul-tearing sob of a mother who genuinely believes she has just watched her child burn to death. I think this is the most stripped down and vulnerable we have seen Carly since the traumatic death of Morgan, and it is a necessary, albeit painful, emotional reset for her character arc. I also want to heavily praise the sound design and audio mixing of this episode. I genuinely think we're missing the point if we don't acknowledge how the audio elevated the sheer terror of the situation. The roaring of the flames didn't just sound like a fire, it sounded like a literal, breathing monster consuming Spoon Island piece by piece. But what I loved most was the artistic choice to mute the blaring sirens of the arriving Port Charles fireboats in the background, focusing the audio entirely on the sickening crackle of burning wood and Carly's ragged, hyperventilating breaths. It made me feel like I was right there on the lawn with her, trapped in this horrific nightmare bubble where nothing else in the entire world mattered except the burning, crumbling stone walls of Wyndemere. I believe this catastrophic event is going to ripple through Port Charles in ways we can't even begin to predict yet, and that excites me beyond measure as a devoted fan. Just think about Sonny Corinthos' reaction when he finds out what happened while he was busy battling Jen Sidwell. Think about Valentine Cassadine, who just left for Geneva to meet with Z, realizing that the very house he was hiding in is safe, but the woman he loves is currently shattering into a million pieces on Spoon Island. The way I see it, this fire is the ultimate catalyst that will finally merge all these disparate, simmering storylines into one explosive narrative. I feel like the writer's choice to isolate Carly and Lucas on the island during the blaze brilliantly forces them to confront their own mortal limitations without the usual mob or police backup. I am fiercely loyal to this show because it still has the incredible courage to completely break our hearts and take huge narrative swings. When the camera slowly panned up from Carly's devastated, kneeling form to show the entirety of the Wyndemere estate engulfed in massive flames against the pitch-black night sky, I literally gasped out loud. It feels like the end of an era for that iconic castle, a place that has housed so much dark, twisted history, from the Cassadines' mind control plots to Phazon's reign of terror, and now Cullum's cold fusion madness. I think letting the castle burn is a beautiful, symbolic cleansing of the island, but the human cost, the terrifying potential loss of Jocelyn and Liesl, is what elevates this from a simple action sequence to a tragedy of Shakespearean proportions. I feel so deeply invested in how Jocelyn will survive this ordeal, because we know she's a fighter, but the psychological scars of being left behind to burn in that dungeon will change her fundamental worldview forever. Ultimately, I am completely in awe of where General Hospital is heading right now. I know the tone is incredibly dark, I know the emotions are heavy, but this is exactly the kind of fearless, character-driven storytelling that sticks with you long after the credits roll. I think we are witnessing a defining, watershed moment for Carly Spencer, a moment that will violently redefine her relationships, her daily motivations, and her very soul. I feel so privileged to watch these incredibly talented actors pour their absolute hearts and souls into this heavy material. The Wyndemere Fire isn't just a shocking plot twist for the sake of ratings. To me, it is a brilliant, devastating crucible that is going to forge our favorite characters into entirely new, battle-scarred versions of themselves, and I am fully strapped in and ready for every single second of the ride.